We're going to start today with an overview of what has changed between the MAT version 5.4 and version 5.5. We'll give a live demonstration of those changes. We will review the timeline for the MAT version 5.5 release, and then we will open it up for a question and answer session. And then we will turn the presentation over to the Bonnie team for them to show you their new interface. So we have made a number of changes with the MAT version 5.5. both to the user interface and to the behind-the-scenes operations. The major change we made to the behind-the-scenes operations was that we changed the way the MAT was filtering out unused items upon packaging. The previous code was missing some of the items that were used and omitting them upon packaging, which then made the CQL invalid and the package failed. This change to the code now ensures that what is used, no matter how deeply nested, or even if it's only in a return clause, will be included upon packaging. Every instance that was brought to our attention was tested with the new filtering and is now working as expected. We also updated the version of the CQL to Elm parser. The MAT is now using version 1.2.20 of the CQL to Elm parser, which includes a validation for UGM units and an updated formatter. More user-facing items include a way to replace an included library with a newer version, a way to retrieve a value set with a program and release, a way to enter value sets and/or codes that have the same name, changes to the applied value sets and applied code tables, a way to choose whether or not to include the code system version in the exports for your direct reference codes, a way to copy value sets or codes from one measure to another, the ability to edit direct reference codes, some changes to the shortcut keys and insert icon options, a new CQL error report, loading bars on all the screens, changes to the exports, and to top it all off, a complete redesign of the population workspace. So with that, let's get into the system and we'll take a look at all of the changes. So starting on the Measure Library tab, we have added a search feature to the measure sharing. When you click on the share icon, you can now see a search box at the top of the screen. This can help you narrow down the list of users for a quicker selection. We're going to move now to the Include section in the CQL workspace. And here we determined that as we move into the second year of annual updates, using the MAT with CQL, that there may be a need for people to update libraries they included in their measures with a newer version of that library. The only way to do this currently is to remove all references to the library in your logic, then delete out the included library, and include a new library with the latest version, and then redo the references in the logic. This was a lot of work just to get a new version of the same library. To address this, we have now added an edit feature when you open the included library. Clicking on this edit icon will open up a box with a list of all of the available versions of that library. To change versions, you simply click on the checkbox next to the version you would like to include and click Apply. Looking at the CQL file view of the included library, you can now see that the version has changed. As the alias you originally gave the library is the same, you should not have to redo the logic in your measure, unless of course one of the expressions names has changed. In the Value Sets section, we added a number of features. The first one is the ability to retrieve an OID based on a program and release. These are optional fields at this point, but if you want to retrieve a value set based on a specific program and release, you simply make those selections before you click on the Retrieve OID button. If that value set exists within the release, it will be retrieved. If it is not included in that release, you will receive an error message stating that it cannot be retrieved from VSAC. This message does not necessarily mean that the value set does not exist in VSAC, but that it does not exist within that particular program and release combination. We have adjusted the applied value sets table to accommodate the listing of the release if one is chosen. So you can see here in the release column. Again, the program and release are optional at this point. You can still retrieve a value set without them the same way you do today. However, if you do choose a program and release, you will not be able to choose a version. Additionally, we have changed the modify label in the applied code table and separated it out into edit, delete, and copy. We felt it was confusing for all three of these icons to be under the same heading, and some users thought they had to check the checkbox in order to delete the value set. It is now clear that the checkbox is for the copy feature and not related to the delete icon. This brings us to the copy and paste feature that has been added. This is functionality that used to exist in the mat prior to the introduction of CQL. Per user request, we are bringing it back in the mat version 5.5. You once again have the capability to copy value sets out of one measure and paste them into another measure. To do this, you would click on the checkbox in line with the value set or sets you would like to copy, and then click on the copy icon. Then you would open another measure, go to the value set section, and click paste. The system will paste in any value sets that you have copied that do not already exist within that measure. If you have copied one that is already in the second measure, the system will not add a second instance. It will simply skip that one. You can also copy value sets from a measure and paste them into a standalone CQL library, or copy from the standalone CQL library and paste them into a measure. We have one more feature in the value set section, and that is the ability to add a suffix onto the value set. This is a user-requested feature that allows you to include two different value sets into the same measure that have the exact same name. In the current system, you're not able to do this as the names of the value sets are used as the identifiers in the CQL logic. If you have two with the same name, neither the system nor the implementers will be able to tell which one you meant to reference when it is used in the logic. Therefore, we needed to find a way to make the identifiers unique to each value set. So to do this, you would apply the first value set as you normally would, and then retrieve the second OID. And then you need to add a suffix. So I'm going to go in the suffix field here, and I'm going to enter O2, and then click Apply. You can see that both value sets are now in the applied code table, and you can differentiate them by the suffix added. Moving into the code section, you will see some of the same updates here as we made to the value set section, such as the ability to add a suffix and the ability to copy codes from one measure and paste them into another. I'm actually going to switch my measures back because I have a better example in this one. These features work the same way in the code section as they did it in the value set section. In addition, we have added a way for you to choose whether or not you would like the code system version included with your direct reference codes. For those codes with which you want the latest version of the code, you would retrieve the code and apply as usual. However, if you have a legacy code that is not available in the most recent code system version, and therefore you would need to state which code system version the code would be found in, you can check the checkbox that states Include Code System Version, and then click Apply. You can see in the table below that there will be a check mark in line with the codes that will have the code system version included, and those codes will have the code system version stated within the exports. We have also included a way to edit a direct reference code. In the past, you either added the code or you didn't. There were not any fields to change, and therefore there was no edit feature. If you no longer wanted the code, you deleted it. However, with this release, you can now add suffixes and choose whether or not to add the code system version. As people may change their minds on these items, we felt an edit option was necessary. To edit a direct reference code, you would click on the edit icon. This will put the code information back into the top half of the screen. Here you can either add or change a suffix, or you can check or uncheck the Include Code System version box, and then click Apply. You should then see the changes reflected in the table below. With the MAT version 5.5, we have made a couple of minor changes to the insert icon and the shortcut keys. Under Functions, Control-Alt-F, we have now added the age in weeks functions. So you can see we have age in weeks at, and we have calculate age in weeks and calculate age in weeks at. Under Units, Control-Alt-U, we have changed what used to be h.b per minute to beats per minute. And now when you use a code as an attribute in the attribute builder, it's going to insert for you into the CQL editor using a tilde rather than an equal sign. It was determined during the measure reviews that the equivalent was more correct in the logic than a hard equals, so we made the change for the insert icon. However, if you need an equal sign rather than a tilde, you can change it once it has been entered into the CQL editor. Another user-requested enhancement was to have a way to get a hard copy of the errors in their CQL file. To accommodate this, we have added an Export Error File button on the View CQL section of the CQL workspace. Clicking this button will produce a text file that shows the CQL library in its entirety, identified with line numbers. Below the CQL file, you will find the errors and which line number they correspond to. If there are no errors in the CQL file, you will just get a text file with your CQL file in it. And now we come to the biggest change in the MAT version 5.5, and that is a complete redesign of the population workspace. This change stems from feedback we received both through user satisfaction surveys and through user acceptance testing that the tool was not very intuitive and that the population workspace was one of the bigger culprits. Redesigning this space to include a left-hand navigation like the rest of the tool and eliminating the right-click menus, which were difficult for our users utilizing assistive technology to navigate, has made the process of adding, removing, and changing expressions in the populations easier to do for everyone. When you first enter the population workspace, you will be taken to the View Population section. This section is still laid out in the tree view that you are used to seeing from the old population workspace. However, there is no longer any functionality on this screen. Just as the View CQL section in the CQL workspace is read-only, so is the View Population section. The purpose of this view is to give you an overall look as to which expressions are currently paired to which populations. The default view for this section is to have all populations expanded so that you can see everything at once. However, the collapse and expand buttons, the plus and the minus signs, still function, so you can adjust the view however you would like. If the measure you are in is in a read-only state, meaning it is versioned, or it is a measure that belongs to someone else and you do not have editing rights, the View Population section is the only section that will appear in the population workspace. Again, this view allows you to see what expression is included in each population, but it does not allow you to make any changes. If you are currently editing a draft measure that you do have editing rights for, you will see in the left-hand navigation all of the populations that are allowed for the measure based on the measure scoring type and the selection made for the patient-based indicator, which were chosen when the measure was created. To add expressions into your populations, You would click on the appropriate population heading in the left-hand navigation, pull down the drop-down menu, and select the expression you would like to stand in for that population, and click the Save icon. To add more instances of that population, click on the Add New Link next to the Save icon. This will add the next sequential population with another drop-down box to allow you to choose an expression. To delete an added population, just click the Delete icon in line with the population you wish to remove. It's important to note here that the numbering of the population still works the way it did in the old population workspace. Meaning if you have two populations, for example, initial population 1 and initial population 2, and you delete initial population 1, the remaining population will still be named initial population 2. Adding another population will create initial population 3, and so forth. It's also important to note that the system will not allow you to remove the last remaining population. For example, if you have a denominator exclusion, and then you determine that you do not need it any longer, the system will not allow you to delete denominator exclusion 1, as it is the only one in the section. To remove the expression from your population, simply reset the drop-down to select definition and click Save. We have also retained the ability to view the logic as it will appear in the human-readable export, and you do that by clicking on the binoculars that are in line with the population. This will open up a new window, so you may need to allow pop-ups for the application before it will generate. The human-readable will also not generate if you have an error within your CQL file. So you will need to go back to the CQL workspace and correct your errors and then try again. So I did have an error. I'm going to come back here, delete out my error, go back to the population workspace, initial population, and now you can see the view human readable generate. All of the populations function the same way with the exception of two. The first one that is slightly different is the stratifications. On the stratification section, you have two Add New links. The one at the top will add additional stratifications, while the one in line with the stratification heading will add additional stratum to that stratification. You pair your populations to the stratum level. Remember that each stratification can have more than one stratum, and you can have multiple stratifications in the same measure, but you can only have one stratification in each measure grouping. In this section, you can add, you can delete, and you can view the human readable just like you can in the other populations. So I'm going to switch my measures again, just so we can take a look at the measure observations. In the measure observation section of the population workspace, you will be pairing functions instead of definitions. A measure observation requires both an aggregate function and a valid user-defined function in order to be complete and to be included in a measure package. Again, here you can add additional, you can delete, and you can view the human readable of that population. It's important to note that if while in the population workspace you make one of the populations that you have included in your measure package grouping invalid, that measure grouping will be removed and will need to be recreated on the Measure Packager tab of the map. You may have noticed as we were navigating the tool that there is a tab missing. The Measure Notes tab, which used to be right here, has been removed from the mat. We did some research and we determined that it was not being utilized. Therefore, we've just removed the entire tab. And next, we did make a couple of changes to the measure exports, and most of those changes affect the human readable. Open a human readable document for you here. In the human readable export, we have removed the word using in the terminology section. We have also removed the code system declaration from any direct reference codes in the terminology section of the human readable and from the HQMF. These changes are mainly a cosmetic change and were requested by the implementers. Additionally, as we stated when we looked at the code section of the CQL workspace, we are only showing the code system version for a direct reference code if the measure developer has indicated that there is a need to do so. This also applies to the human readable export and the HQMF, and it was requested by implementers and corroborated by NLM. So this ends our live demonstration portion of the MAT version 5.5. Let's go back to the PowerPoint and we'll take a look at the schedule. So the MAT version 5.5 is scheduled for release into the production environment the evening of Tuesday, May 29th, 2018. Release notes will be posted to the MAT public website after the release is complete, and an updated user guide will be available within 10 days following the release. Please stay tuned to hear a disclaimer regarding this presentation. This presentation was prepared as a tool to assist providers and is not intended to grant rights or impose obligations. Although every reasonable effort has been made to assure the accuracy of the information within these pages, the ultimate responsibility for the correct submission of claims and response to any remittance advice lies with the provider of services. This publication is a general summary that explains certain aspects of the Medicare program, but is not a legal document. The official Medicare program provisions are contained in the relevant laws, regulations, and rulings. Medicare policy changes frequently, and links to the source documents have been provided within this document for your reference. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, employees, agents, and staff make no representation, warranty, or guarantee that this compilation of Medicare information is error-free and will bear no responsibility or liability for the results or consequences of the use of this guide.